Well, welcome everyone. My name is Bruce Belzowski. I'm the Managing Director of the Automotive Futures Group here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I'd like to welcome you to our 15th annual Inside China Automotive Conference. It's been a long 15 years. We started this back in 2008, where we were studying the Chinese auto industry. We started with a research project in 2005. And during that research project called Inside China, we went to China and did interviews with the Chinese, asking them what they thought about their industry, how they thought it would advance. And one of the things we asked them was when we thought they would be coming to the United States. And it was 2005 at the time, and they were estimating around 2010 that they would be coming to the United States. So things have slowed down a little bit, but things have sped up in a lot of other ways in terms of the development of the industry. I'm going to start off with some slides about intro before we get to our first speaker. Talk a little bit about the Automotive Futures Group, conference logistics, sales and production data from China, and 2022 consumer insights. As I said, my name is Bruce Belzowski. I'm the Managing Director of the Automotive Futures Group here in Ann Arbor. I'm retired from the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute. Our funding comes from three main sources: our affiliate program, our research, and our 5 annual conferences. And we always like to thank our affiliates, because without them, we could not be doing what we're doing. These are our list of our current affiliates. If you are interested in joining the group, please feel free to contact me. These are a list of some of our research partners that we've been working with over the last 20 to 30 years. They're IT orgs, OEMs, government NGOs, suppliers, and consultants. Our major research areas are powertrain strategies, and now it's propulsion strategies for the 21st century. Our EV evolutions group that we'll talk about later today, and new mobility, looking at IT, technology, policy, and innovative business models within the area of new mobility. Our researchers primarily made up of students. This is our latest set of students. They tend to come and go, but they cross many different areas of within the university. As well as Kara Alkire, who's here today on the live stream, taking your questions that you're going to share with us. If you have any questions along the way, you can enter them into the chat, and she will relay those. She's also doing quality control as we speak. Thank you, Kara. One of the things that we've instituted within the last couple of years is our LinkedIn page. We're posting 2 to 3 times a week, so we appreciate it if you connect with us on LinkedIn, but then follow our page. Next conference is February 22nd, is going to be our New Mobility Conference, post-pandemic new mobility strategies. And then on April 20th, we're looking at electric vehicle challenges and opportunities, policies, consumers, and company strategies. We have 4 speakers with us today. Professor Yi Wu from Tsinghua University we had him online earlier. Hopefully he'll be able to join us again shortly. He'll be followed by Scott Kennedy from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And Song Lu is here with us today. He's from Valeo, North America. And Jishu Wang is from Paris. She's from the University of Paris Nord. She's going to be joining us as our last speaker. So as I said, Professor Wu is starting. We'll do short Q&As. We'll do about a 10-minute Q&A after each speaker. We ask all our speakers to, if they can stick around and participate in the Q&As, we appreciate if they can get get their opinions and ideas out on topics that other people may be speaking about. So I'll be talking about, we'll start out with Professor Wu, then Scott. We'll take a 20-minute break. Then I'll speak about our new program on EV evolutions. Then Song Lu will present, and then we'll finish with Shizhu Wang coming to us from Paris. And then we'll adjourn to lunch, at least for the people who are here. The post-conference, all the attendees get a link to the presentations. Those should be out by the weekend. And our affiliates will get that, plus a summary review of what the highlights from the conference. The agenda, speaker bios, registration lists, sponsorship opportunities, affiliate information, and upcoming events are all on our the Inside China website. We sent to you, which we sent to you online through email yesterday. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to us. For audience questions, we have, as I said, two forms. For people who are here in person, we have question cards. If you have questions you want to write out, Kara will pick those up and then we'll sort through those. You can also, if you want to ask a question directly, you can come up to the microphone and ask your question. You can do that to the speakers as well. And also, for those of you who are on the live stream, there's a linked to question form. You want to enter that, and Kara will receive that as well. And then we'll have that. You have opportunity to participate through Q&A. All right. Our next set of slides is going to look at some sales and production information from China. Most of it is from the 2021 timeframe because we have some 2022 data, but it's not complete, of course. So we'll be focusing on that. But first, we want to talk about some of the challenges of manufacturing in China. So some of the key issues that people are seeing right now in terms of navigating challenges of operating in China includes emergency response plans, developing companies trying to make manufacturing changes. Of course, the COVID-19 lockdowns are causing this to happen within the companies. Also diversifying their supply chains. They're doing dual sourcing is an important principle that companies are doing so that they'll be able to deal with any kind of disruptions, not just in China, but anywhere in the world. This is becoming a much bigger deal for manufacturers and suppliers. They're also looking at exit strategies, having to do with tensions between China and the US, as well as Europe. What to do in case of major changes in the relationships. And then finally, consumer nationalism. They said, in particular, foreign manufacturers need to improve their designs and their products in order to survive a growing trend in consumer nationalism in China. Also, foreign brands need to also tailor their brands more to what the Chinese consumers want. So these are some of the issues that manufacturers and suppliers are dealing with in China. Some of the company responses to what's going on in China in terms of manufacturing. Two different stories here. We have VW and BMW have proclaimed their continued manufacturing in China. The Chancellor of Germany is going to visit China. We saw that the CEO for VW is going to push to preserve its share of the world's largest car market. And VW announced investing $2 billion in a group called Horizon Robotics. So that they're going to build chips for VW within China. So this is a company, BMW and VW, we're all in for China. And it's probably true for GM and Mercedes as well. But then there's Stellantis. Stellantis exited both of its JVs with Dongfeng and GAC. At the Paris Auto Show recently, the CEO, Carlos Tavares, said he was considering a possibility of moving all production of Peugeot and Citroën vehicles in China, calling it an asset-light strategy, and that instead of producing and selling there, they would import vehicles from plants in Europe and the US. Now, there's probably a good reason for this, having to do with their not selling as many vehicles as the other joint venture companies. And it could be the beginning of companies that are, if they're not doing well in China, they may consider just importing into China. Of course, you have to pay tariffs, at least 25% tariffs on imports to China. But if you're doing small volumes, it may make sense. This is something that it's kind of like follows things that we were following back in 2008. I mean, all the major global manufacturers and suppliers were already in China, and they were continuing over the next 10 years to just continue to grow their manufacturing footprints in China. And it led to tremendous amount of competition, both from the manufacturer, within the manufacturer, foreign manufacturers, but also within with the Chinese manufacturers. And with the introduction in 2009, around 2009, the central government decided that it was going to be a bigger challenge for their companies to be able to compete on internal combustion engines, and also because of major pollution in their cities, that they were going to move to new energy vehicles. And this is the major change that has taken place. So probably it's since beginning around the 2010s. So that there's even more competition now in China in terms of NEVs as well as internal combustion engine vehicles. So we may see other companies decide that it's better to import based on on what they're selling in China. So we divide the industry into joint venture manufacturers. GAC has other companies that they're connected with. BAC Group, SAIC, and the companies that are joint venture brands, and there as well as the independent domestic manufacturers like BYD, Great Wall, and Geely, and one subgroup, Tesla, which has no joint venture partner, and Honda has no joint venture partner for one of their plants. They have joint ventures with another group. So you look at the GAC group with Fiat. Well, Fiat is no longer part of probably the GAC group. It's more like just Honda and Toyota. And Nissan is connected with Dongfeng, and Chang'an is part of Ford and Mazda. FAW part of Toyota and Volkswagen. BAC group with Mercedes and Hyundai. And SAIC with GM and Volkswagen, and Brilliance with BMW. Brilliance has it kind of shows the differences that have taken place. Most of these joint ventures are like 50-50 joint ventures, and the Chinese government allowed recently companies to take a larger share of the joint venture, and BMW now I think owns 75% of the joint venture with Brilliance, which I think was part of the problem with the GAC and Stellantis, where Stellantis wanted to take a larger share and the government was not okaying it, and this is one of the reasons that they left. The main independent domestic brands are GMC, Foton, BYD, as well as GAC, Geely, Chery, and Great Wall. These are some of the main ones. Okay. And some of the independent EV manufacturers are new ones. Li Auto, NIO, Xpeng, and Weltmeister. We'll see some of those. We'll talk about some of those later during our other session. When we start looking at the sales of the China light duty vehicles, We've got you see for 2021, a slight increase after decreases from in 2018, 2019, and 2020. Of course, a lot of this has to do with the pandemic, but this is something that we're seeing some growth in 2021, and I think 2022. It's probably going to be a little more challenging. We've got some information on 2022. We saw some growth from month to month, but we saw lockdown stories going on, particularly in April and May. So this is something that we'll see how this is going to end up this year. Now, I'm going to cut off, I think, the rest of my presentation just because of timing, and we're going to leave these slides available to people online. They'll be available to everybody who's registered. I'm doing this just because of our timing. We're going to have Professor Wu come on next to give his presentation, because the speaker that follows him, Scott Kennedy, he really only has from 10 to 10:30 on his schedule. So we're going to be trying to keep to that schedule as much as we can. So there's a lot of information here. You'll be able to see this on the slides that we provide to you on the weekend. So feel free to ask us questions about anything related to this. But I think I'm going to stop my share right now and introduce Professor Wu from Tsinghua University. Yi Wu has been very focused on the emissions controls of vehicles for many years. And he's leading the way in terms of his development of their what he's going to talk about today is the life cycle analysis of what they're doing to measure the effects of electric vehicles on the Chinese environment. So we're going to see when you're looking at LCAs, life cycle analysis, you're looking at all the different inputs where energy and emissions occur. And it's always a very interesting story to hear about. So Professor Wu, I think I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. And can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So let me share my slide first. Okay, so can you see the slide?
We can see the slides, yes.
Okay, great. So let me. Okay, thank you. Thank you for it's great to have a chance to talk this topic. And so today we will focus on the life cycle environment benefit analysis from the e-mobility in China, because I think you are aware that over the past couple of years, the growth of the electric vehicles is increasing very fast in China. So before I dig into the life cycle assessment, I would like to share some background information for China's e-mobility. I always start with these slides, but I just update the data every couple of years. And here you can see, so over the past 30 years, and China grows to the third giant auto market, so compared with the US and the EU. And very recently, so last year, the China's automobile market has exceeded 300 million. And you can see over the past 20 years, they represent an average annual growth rate more than 15%. And currently, the ownership has surpassed to 200,000 people. And compared to the ownership in the US and the EU, it is still a small number. We know the US number, the ownership is close to 800, and EU's number is around 500 to 600. So we envision for the next 10 to 20 years, the ownership will grow to around 300 to 400,000 people. So with a very simple calculation, you can see the stock will continue to grow to around 400 to 500 million. So that's going to be a big challenge for our environment and climate goals. And here you can see, let me hide this. Yeah. So here you can see, because of the fast growth of the vehicles in China, so the motor vehicles have become the most significant local sources for the air pollution. For example, in the left, you see the PM 2.5 source apportionment. So the contribution from the transportation is increasing. And here you see for the megacities in East China, Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, those cities, they all become the leading sources, local sources. And on the right, you see mobile sources also serve as the key contributor to ozone pollution. And this is become a big challenge for China. So you see the arrows. So the red arrows shows over the past 5 years, the ozone concentration is increasing. So you can see for most of the cities in the eastern China, the arrow is red or the brown. So which means the ozone is continue to getting worse. And so because of the challenge from the transportation, so over the past 20 years of the practice, China has established an integrated vehicle fuel traffic emission control systems. So you can see we have continue to strengthen our emission standards for vehicles and fuels, and continue to enhance our in-use vehicle supervision and also transportation optimization, intelligent decisions, and also the clean transportation energy. And over the past, you may aware about these emission standards for vehicles and fuels. So here you can see over the past 20 years, we just finished a summary report to summarize the vehicle emission control over the past 20 years. And you can see starting from 2000, so the nationwide, the China 1, actually, which is equivalent to Euro 1. And now we are moving to China 6. And at the same time, our fuel quality is also getting improved. For example, the sulfur content is gradually reduced to 10 ppm. And you see also the biofuel is also promoted in China. But you see this chart, our biofuel, no matter biodiesel or bioethanol stock, compared with the US or EU or Brazil, is still small. But I envision for the next 10 or 20 years, the biofuel will start to grow. But this is not my major focus for today's talk. So today we will pretty much focus on this part. So the clean transportation energy. So how can we promote the new energy vehicles in China, and specifically electric vehicles? And here you can see over the past, actually the e-mobility starting in 2009. And you may know that so-called 10 cities with 1,000 new energy vehicles promotion. So that started in 2009, and you can see within this less than 15 years, so China has become the largest EV market. And especially since 2016, you see the electric vehicle, the new car sales pretty much contribute 50%. And now our EV population just by end of this June this year, so it's already more than 10 million. And we envision the e-mobility will be an essential component for China's environment and climate ambitions, because we have two major goals. By 2035 is the so-called beautiful China. We are continue to improve our air quality, and by 2030 is carbon neutrality, which is you are already get very familiar with these goals. And so ICCT announced the so-called EV capitals over the past couple of years, and we learned over the world the cities playing a key leading role in acceleration e-mobility. And you can see, so the top 25 electric vehicle capitals have only 4% of world's population, but the electric passenger vehicle sales, they are contribute as high as 1/3 of the world's total. And here you can see this is a recent list. In 2020, the cities from 9 countries are in that list, and you see in China 13 cities are in, and 8 from Europe, 3 from US, and 1 from South Korea. And in terms of the total numbers, Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen, these 3 cities ranks the top 3 in the world. And if we look in, if we use Shenzhen as an example, because Shenzhen in China, we think it's pretty much a pioneer city of the e-mobility. And you see their promotion is very ambitious and aggressive. And currently you see Shenzhen became the first city in the world with 100% of electrification for buses and taxi. And very recently, Shenzhen promoted the so-called low emission zone. They established 10 low emission zones in this city, and to ban the use of the diesel trucks in these 10 zones. And because of these factors, so you see the electric trucks also ranked the top during the past 5 years. And very recent data I was received by last year, the electric logistic trucks already exceed for 100,000 in Shenzhen. So these are some background information. So because of the electric market grows so fast, so in scientific domain, so we need to let the policymakers and let the public domains to know. So what's the environmental benefit with this e-mobility? So over the past 10 years. And I have been working with Michael in Argonne for long term. So when I was back to Tsinghua, I continue to develop the life cycle methodologies and inventories for both fuel cycle and vehicle material cycles for different vehicle technologies. And electric vehicle is our major focus. And when we are looking into the electric vehicles, we know they are zero emitters on the road, but the emissions, they transferred to the upstream, either the power and the battery production. So that's why a couple of years ago, a couple of Chinese institutions, including Tsinghua, we are working together to develop some the basic the evaluation methodologies, and also some annual reports to evaluate the life cycle and impacts from those electric vehicles. And for such a LCA research, we experienced some evolvements. At the very beginning, we focused primarily on the fuel cycle because the upstream, the electricity production is a major contribution to the life cycle. And the next stage, we are moving we are moving to the mature cycle because we know when we produce the major lithium-ion batteries, those materials such as nickel, lithium, and cobalt, they are very energy intensive. So we also spend our attention to material cycle, and currently we trying to combine the fuel cycle and the material cycle together. And very recently, we trying to connect the emissions with the air quality. So which means we need to develop some emission special allocations, just like this map. We just put the emission from coal mining, emission from battery production, emission from the power production with the very detailed special allocation methodologies. And when we are talking the life cycle analysis, especially for fuel cycle, power generation mix is one of the key. I show you, this is a chart we developed about in, I think it's 2012, about 10 years ago. So, 10 years ago, when we see the 2010 number, you see the coal is pretty much dominated for most of the regions. So for in southern China, you see some numbers of the renewable power. And here you can see, so 10 years ago, we see a lot of the news media, they have a lot of debate on the EVs environment impacts in China. So it could be evil or angel. For example, Reuters just mentioned the EV could be worse than the air quality, worse than smog. But CNN just mentioned it's an angel, it's a green car. So they asked my opinion. I said, it depends. It really depends. For example, if you are looking into the power generation in the northern China, when the coal is pretty much dominant, you may have some numbers is not favoring for the electric vehicles. So here I just show you an example. We just developed so-called break-even for the well-to-wheel CO2 emissions. So break-even, which means under such a power generation mix, the CO2 emission from the electric vehicles may not be better than the conventional gasoline vehicles. So let's take in the data of 10 years ago as an example. If the fuel economy ratio for BEV versus conventional gasoline vehicle, if it's 300, so you see the break-even is 77% of coal power. So which means if we back to 2010, the North China, Northeast China, and East China, their coal power is all higher than 77%. And even the fuel economy gains from battery electric vehicles increase to 350. You see the break-even for the coal power is 95%. So that really depends on the power generation mix and the fuel economy ratios between these two vehicle technologies. And very recently, we just summarized the predictions of the China's power generation mix. You see, most of the previous prediction underestimated the promotion of the renewable power in China. And here you can see that's 10 years ago. We collected the so-called aggressive the power generation mix for 2030. But now you see this is the 2020's real world number in China. So we already have our coal power reach the most aggressive prediction back to 10 years ago. So we envision for the next decades, the share of coal power might drop faster. So this is our new prediction for 2030. So the nationwide, the coal power may decrease to under 40%. And in the southern China, the coal power could be even lower to around 20-25%. It could be very clean in terms of the power generation mix. So if with this new generation mix, you see our CO2 burdens is getting much cleaner than the before. 10 years ago, it's 800 to 900 grams per kilowatt hour in terms of well to pump stage. So now our number is 590 grams. And for the next 10 years, we envision they will decrease further to 350 grams per kilowatt hours. And because of different regions, you see the numbers could be different. And in the southwest and southern China, the renewable power is dominant, and the CO2 burden is much lower than other regions. And for material cycle, I would like to just give a very brief summary. You see, so this is the material mass fraction for gasoline and battery electric vehicles. You see aluminum and copper, those kind of material, and also lithium. These metals will be much higher for the battery electric vehicles. And we collected a very local database for these major materials. And you see, this is the US average. And when we do a survey for a couple of the steel plants, so the total CO2 emission burdens is quite similar to with the US average, because the steel production is quite a mature technology. But if we move to aluminum and copper, their numbers could be significantly different with the US default data. And furthermore, if we try to reuse the aluminum and the copper, their CO2 burden could be decreased very significantly. And for battery, we know we have two major battery technologies in China. One is the lithium iron phosphate, and the second is the nickel cobalt magnesium, the lithium ion batteries. And for nickel magnesium cobalt, we have the different shares of these three metals. And currently, we have more and more NCM 811. And here you see this is the installed capacity of the EV battery in China. So 2 years ago, nickel cobalt magnesium contribute around 60%. But the very recent data for this year, we see the LFP increase significantly. And the energy density differs for these two technologies. And we also see, we collect the data for the past 5 years, and the improvement for the battery technology is significant. There are two major improvements. One is the battery energy density itself. You see the energy density is increasing very fast. And then secondly, for the battery electric vehicle, their fuel economy also improving over time. So back to 5 years ago, it's about average is around 15 kilowatt hour per 100 kilometer, which is certificate number. But now the certificate number is lower to 13, around 13 kilowatt hour per 100 kilometer. And with these two improvements, we see the battery could become smaller, and we can help to save the materials as well. And here you can see we either go this way, the energy density for the battery improvement, and we also can see the benefit from the BEV fuel economy. So with two combined, we envision for the 2030, the number, the CO2 could be only 50% of the current value. So which means we can help to reduce our CO2 burden significantly for the battery material cycle. So when we lump this fuel cycle and the battery cycle together, so I just show you two slides to see the results. So pretty much you see the penetration of the renewable energy and the material battery advancement continue to improve the greenhouse gas emission for all electric vehicle categories. So here I presented the passenger car, bus, and light duty truck as examples. And currently we see the CO2 reduction is around 20 to 40%. And by 2030, we see the benefit will increase to 40 to 60%, depends on the different vehicle technology. For heavy duty heavy duty trucks, the the benefits we are evaluating them, and the data is quite interesting. And so maybe next year I can present the new data for the heavy duty electric trucks. And for the air pollutions, you see, it's very interesting story. We know for light duty, VOC is our major focus. And the light duty electric vehicle can substantially reduce VOC emissions. And for heavy duty vehicles, here I show bus as an example. So heavy duty electric vehicles can substantially reduce NOx emissions. And with these two benefits together, that provide us some envision for the air quality benefits for electric vehicles. So that's why over the past couple years, we extend our simulation from life cycle analysis to air quality simulation and the public health assessment for electric vehicles. And this is what we published in Nature Sustainability 3 years ago. So if we assume around 30% of e-mobility in 2030, so here you can see this is the benefit we can achieve. So the general conclusion is they can deliver significant reduction of the annual PM 2.5 and NO2 concentration, and also help to elevate to mitigate the peak season ozone concentration by 2030. So this is a great effort from the e-mobility. And if we evaluate their public health benefits, the e-mobility can avoid up to nearly 20,000 premature deaths, and that's going to be a great health benefits. And these health benefits are highly concentrated in the urban area because the e-mobility is pretty much in these big cities. And we also see if we just converted all the public health benefits and climate health to money, to compare to each other, we see the public health benefits could be even higher than the climate benefits in the near future. But that's a big debate for this issue. So in a summary, we see that China has become the largest EV market. So when we look into their benefit of the environment, so we have to acknowledge these benefits are strongly relevant to the generation mix, clean coal technology, fuel economy, and material energy efficiency. But with the new data available for very recently, we see the fleet electrification can synchronize air quality, climate, and health benefits. So which means for climate, air quality, and health, e-mobility all provide very, very promising benefits for them. But what's next for our future? Because as I mentioned earlier, so by 2035, the PM 2.5 ozone continue to our big challenge. And the carbon neutrality is the target will lead us to the clean energy transition on a long-term scale. And we are working on the China 7 standards. It's going to be technology neutral and fuel neutral. So which means in this emission technologies, maybe CO2 emissions will be included. So we will develop some CO2 limits for hybrid and plug-in hybrid. And for battery electric vehicles, we will need to build the life cycle platform because the power cleanness and the material cleanness, the supply chain cleanness is going to be our future for the electric vehicles. Okay, thank you. So that's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Wu. Very, very interesting presentation. We have some questions for you to kind of start things off. But as I said earlier, we have our next speaker, Scott Kennedy, who's supposed to be joining us at 10 o'clock. I know that you said you're going to be able to stick around for a little while. We appreciate that. I think we'll maybe ask a couple of questions now while we're waiting for Scott, and then also maybe ask you some questions after Scott's done with his presentation, so that we can get some more insight from you. Kara's collecting cards, and one of the questions that has already come up from our audience has to do with competition for energy among industries. Are there certain industries that are giving preference for energy, or is it and how is this affecting the marketplace?
You mean the energy company?
I think it's just the availability of energy.
Okay. I think hydrogen and biofuel could be two supplemental new energies for the e-mobility. In terms of the light duty, I think bioethanol could be a good supply to the current gasoline market, because the biofuel could achieve some CO2 benefits, especially we have the carbon goals. The second part for hydrogen, so far we see it could be a good supplemental for the heavy duty, because in very recently we evaluated the e-mobility for heavy duty. We see some numbers is not that as promising as light duty, because the battery loading needs to be extremely heavy for the heavy duty, and they lose some benefit for that. So hydrogen could be beneficial for the long distance heavy duty transportation. But in China, 2 years ago, they just started a demo for hydrogen application in Beijing, Shanghai, and there are 5 regions. They are starting working on the hydrogen promotion demonstration. Okay,
that's true here in the U.S. as well. That they're starting to look at hydrogen for heavy duty vehicles rather than passenger cars. Though the Japanese are convinced that we could continue to do this as well with the heavy duty vehicle with passenger vehicles. And I'm sure there'll probably be there's probably some of that is also available within China within passenger vehicles. We have Scott who's joining us right now. Professor Wu, I think let's do some more questions with you after Scott is done, and if you can stay with us, okay?
Yes, I can stay for a while.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Welcome, Scott.
Good to be here with you, Bruce, and everybody. I'm sorry that I'm not in Michigan with everybody, but I'm glad we have this chance to talk about China and the auto sector and things like that. So happy to be here, Bruce, and I'll follow your lead in terms of what you'd like me to do.
Yeah, you can share your screen if you have some slides you want to use, and tell the story.
Sure. Okay. And we've got 25 minutes altogether, correct?
Yes. And we want to try a little bit of Q&A before you take off.
Okay, super. Okay. Well, I'm going to, and then let me share my screen, and I'll get going here. So
while you're doing that, I'll do a quick intro for you. So Scott Kennedy is a senior advisor and trustee chair in the Chinese business and economics at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a leading authority on Chinese economic policy. Scott has been traveling to China for over 30 years. His specific areas of expertise include industrial policy, technology, innovation, and business lobbying, U.S.-China commercial relations, and global governance. I think Scott has worked at Indiana University. His PhD comes from George Washington University. And with that, Scott, I'll let you take it away.
Well, thanks, Bruce. And it's good to be here. And I was in a Big Ten university for 15 years. Never enjoyed a Saturday afternoon in the fall when we had to play Michigan. So I'm glad I'm now at a think tank that doesn't have a football team. We don't have, unfortunately, we also don't have a basketball team, which provided more support for us when we had to play against you guys. But it's good to be here with everybody, regardless of whether you're in the U.S. or Asia or Europe or elsewhere right now. I just want to take a few minutes to say a little bit about my perspective on where China is and the U.S. is in terms of autos and the relationship, and then look forward to having a little bit of discussion. This is a very short window of time that we're going to talk this morning, so feel free to follow up with me afterward directly by email, and then we can continue the conversation. I just returned from a 7-week trip to China. I'm the first U.S. think tanker from Washington to go to China since the pandemic in early 2020. So that's almost 3 years of nobody traveling to China for work or meetings or pleasure. And I just couldn't wait any longer. My research depends on examining the gap between Chinese policy on various industries and actual commercial performance. And if you're not in China, that gap is very difficult to evaluate. It's really important to go visit companies, talk to analysts, see what the market looks like on the ground. In addition, U.S.-China relations have been in a tailspin, and I think a lot of that tailspin is the product of very different interests and ideology, and across a whole range of issues. But the lack of face-to-face communication is certainly making it harder to address any of those issues and provide any kind of strategic reassurance to the other side. So for both of those reasons, I thought it was really important to go. So I went at the beginning of September, returned in late October. So a 7-week trip altogether. I flew from Taipei directly into Beijing, where I quarantined for 10 days, then went down to Shanghai for a little over a week, and then came back to the US. I had 105 meetings while I was in China with government officials, foreign embassies, industry, Chinese industry, global industry, journalists, scholars, a ton of meetings. Like I said, I went down to Shanghai as well, and there was also warmly welcomed. Of course, when you're in China, it is ubiquitous that you will find these stations where you have to take your COVID test. In Beijing, it was every 2 or 3 days. In Shanghai, I basically took a test every single day. This is just outside my hotel in Shanghai, in downtown, and the zero COVID is the dominant issue affecting China right now, domestically and internationally. China is still in the middle of this pandemic. The U.S. and almost all of the rest of the world is now in a post-pandemic era. We're looking at it in our rearview mirror. In fact, we don't want to even look in the rearview mirror. We're trying to forget it as fast as we can, even though there are still a significant number of cases and deaths on a daily basis in the United States, and we're really not even keeping count anymore in any coherent fashion. But in China, they are in the middle of this pandemic still, and pandemic policies and requiring testing. And there, you have to test, and then you have to scan your phone to get into any building or a taxi, even your own. And so, and of course, this is having a huge effect on the number of foreigners in China. There's almost no foreigners in China, a few expats, but only 400 American students on the ground in China, down from 11,000 in 2018. There are no foreign tourists in China. In addition, the economy is barely growing, if at all. I know China said 3.9% in Q3. I would be surprised if that's the real an accurate number. And you could just see there's just very little consumption, few tourists. Stores have very few people in them. And when I talk to investors, they are holding their money because it's uncertainty in every direction as far as the eye can see for people. Because of zero COVID, they're not sure if they need to save for a rainy day, because that rainy day is here now, and U.S.-China relations, technology restrictions, Taiwan, the possibility of war, all of these create anxieties and is depressing commercial activity. The one area, and I think this might be the only area where things are different, is with electric vehicles, where the market is still growing quite rapidly. This is data from the China Association of Automobile Manufacturers with their monthly reports of sales in hundreds of thousands of vehicles. And you can see that China's been growing rapidly. This is year by year. And you can see in 2021, it followed the regular pattern of sales growing towards the end of the year, which is when government agencies and companies get their subsidies paid for it, and so the sales always increase toward the end of the year. In 2022, sales have continued to grow quite significantly. The curve looks a little bit different, but we'll see what the November and December data look like. But this is really the only market that is really growing in China right now. We've kept math on this market to look at government support for this industry. And the government has said that subsidies and rebates are going to decline. And they have as a percent of how much they're offering back. But the market sales have continued to grow. And so the actual amount of subsidies and rebates that are being given has also increased, as well as sales tax exemptions. This is not official government statistics. These are our own calculations, because I don't really have a lot of faith in the Chinese statistics on this. So in fact, actually in 2021, by our math, total government support for the electric vehicle sector in China was 226 billion Chinese renminbi. Divide that by roughly 7, and that will give you the US dollar figure. So that is probably 30 some billion US dollars in subsidies. That is a lot of money in 1 year for this industry, which says it's not operating according to market dynamics, but because of government support. Nevertheless, there is a lot of activity and a lot of things going on that I didn't know about until I got to China in September. I've written 2 long reports on China's electric vehicle industry and have been looking at it pretty intensely since 2016. And I got to tell you, I was amazed by the whole variety of different kinds of electric vehicles and by different types of companies that I'd never heard of. I'd never heard of Avatar before. I'd heard of Xpeng and Neo and others, but this is just inside the Avatar showroom in Beijing. And when you're on the streets in China, in Beijing and Shanghai, I saw all different kinds of brands I had never heard of before. And it just shows now in 2 years, a whole bunch of these companies may be gone, but nevertheless, there's a lot that's happening. This is in Shanghai. This is the Shanghai Automotive's own electric car that has L3 or maybe L2, advanced L2 autonomous technology in it. And I wanted to see what these vehicles are like and what autonomous vehicles are like in China. I'd asked some folks in Beijing if I could visit, for example, Baidu and its Apollo project and see what they're doing. And there just wasn't enough time while I was there, so planned a little bit ahead. And when I got to Shanghai, a company called Momenta, which makes autonomous vehicle equipment that they sell to automakers, agreed to see me and we met at this SAIC showroom, which is where this car was. But what I got to do is I said, I want a ride. Can I get a ride in a car to see what it feels like? And so they provided it. So Momenta, which the Chinese name is Zhiji, arranged for me to take a ride and see what their technology is like. And so this was the path they took me on in Shanghai. Not all of that path is using the autonomous technology, but a significant portion of it was. And I'm going to show you a little bit of video from my time there in the car. So this is from my phone driving around. And Shanghai has these regular city streets, and it also has raised roads with exits and entrances on it that feel like a highway, but that go through the middle of downtown. And that's where they turned things on for about a minute. And so I'm going to play this for you. This is about 1 minute and 20 seconds of video, and you're going to hear me and the safety driver talking. Now, the safety driver looks like he has his hands on the wheel, but he just has them close to the wheel, and he explains that according to Chinese law, there must be a safety driver in the driver's seat, and they can't take their fingers very far away from the steering wheel because it's required. But nevertheless, this is autonomous driving, and so I wanted to see what this was like, and so here we go.
所以你的手就是因为谨慎啊，所以他是车是自己做的吗？
对，现在因为是这样的，因为法律要求我们手是不能脱离方向盘的啊，然后我们这个脱离的时候，那个就车辆也一定会提醒啊，师傅可以试一下啊，你不要碰着方向盘，可以试一下给大家看一下。
OK，
So you're going to see the car, I think, is going to switch lanes in just a while. And I'm not an expert in autonomous vehicle technology, but it felt quite smooth to me. And you can see that the screen in front is taking note of all the cars that are around it. And I think there's something like 24 cameras on this car in addition to LiDAR.
然后中间只会做一些细调啊，这样的话也是可以保证我们一个乘坐体验感。好，现在的话，我们刚刚采用了一个交互式变道，大概你可以看到，就是交互式变道情况下，我们打灯了过后啊。
All right, so let me stop there. And oops, I'll stop my sharing. And so there's, China's in the midst of the pandemic still. The economy is depressed, and just about every sector is suffering, save for electric vehicles. In fact, China's started to export cars, not just Teslas, but others. And so we will see what that means for the global market. I think, a report I wrote a few years ago said that there may be a coming NEV war. And that is obviously delayed by COVID, also by US tariffs on Chinese vehicles of all sorts. But the Chinese have started to export to Europe. And so that we might eventually get to that conflict, because obviously the Chinese vehicles are going to be priced highly competitively, but it's going to be very difficult for others to respond to this challenge, because the Chinese aren't just exporting, they're investing elsewhere around the world. And therefore, once you're invested in Europe, for example, you're now domestic industry. So you can't use anti-dumping or the typical fair trade remedies to stop those sales. So, and also, European automakers are now buying heavily from CATL, the world's largest electric vehicle battery maker. And so there's a level of integration that is also going to complicate any type of protectionist moves. So I think we're in a really interesting new space in the auto sector compared to others. And it was one of the, interesting things I tried to take note of while I was on the ground in China. So let me stop there. Look forward to comments, questions. Bruce?
Very good. Thank you, Scott. Let's see. Okay, Scott, now, when you look at what's going on in China economically, what do you see as the biggest challenge that they're facing? I think you would probably argue it's COVID, right? It's the lockdowns. How do you see this playing out over the next couple of years?
Sure. Well, I think you're right that in the short term, Bruce, getting to a post-pandemic era is the most important short-term issue. It's having a huge effect on the economy as a whole, and it may be, if China just remained in a zero COVID approach, that eventually electric vehicles would also succumb to policies, because the government doesn't have an unlimited amount of funding to provide subsidies for the producers or for buyers. My sense is that they're trying to begin to shift away from zero COVID. They're calling it the perfection of the zero COVID policy, but it really means adjusting, but very gradually. And so I would say something like 6 to 12 months would be a potential window to get to the other side. That's a slightly longer time than it's taken others. Everybody in the region and a lot of other countries had their own zero COVID policies until Omicron at the end of 2021, and then started to shift away. It took South Korea, Japan, Taiwan basically 6 months to get to the other side, where they had a big ramp up in vaccinations, a big spike in cases, but had invested significantly enough in healthcare to limit severe illness and death, which is where they've gotten now. China's a much larger country, much less equipped healthcare system to deal with people who have COVID. And we're not, most Chinese still live either in the countryside or in small cities and towns that don't have great healthcare systems. So it is a really imposing challenge for them to try and move to a post-pandemic era with as little loss of life and severe illness as possible. And I think when you tell Chinese, well, you just have to go through it, that's not enough for them. They do not want to have this turn. And so they're willing to sacrifice economic growth, consumption, investment to achieve that goal. But I do think that they've started, and we've got sort of a 6 to 12 month windows is my best guess. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, likely. I would say, but there are other really big challenges that this economy faces. Significant debt in the financial system, also demographic shifts as well. So, and I think, China has innovated and grown based on deep integration with the rest of the world, including in the auto sector, right? Foreign companies being invested in China, joint ventures, other types of collaborations. That's been critical for the auto sector as it's been for the rest of the economy. And as autos change from simply being individual modes of transportation to networked pieces of equipment that are collecting data and transferring data, and where there's autonomy, some level of autonomy in vehicles, and they're using electric and new types of propulsion systems and hydrogen, that is going to increasingly bump into anxieties in Washington and other places about national security, about the most advanced technologies. And that means potential pressure on international collaboration, even in this sector. So I'm worried about all of those things having pressure on the Chinese economy.
Scott, when you look at what the automotive manufacturers, the foreign auto manufacturers and suppliers, and compare those to the Chinese auto manufacturers and suppliers, do you see differences in how they're approaching their either production and sales, or how they're managing their businesses?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say that the gap between the quality of foreign automakers and Chinese has shrunk in many aspects of vehicles. It's partly that 30-year relationship through the various joint ventures and collaborations that has also led to the development of very significant deep supply chains in the sector throughout that serve not just domestic Chinese companies, but foreign makers. I think a GM car in China is probably got a very, very high percentage of its components sourced from within China, not just from Bosch and foreign auto suppliers, but domestic Chinese ones as well. So obviously the movement away from internal combustion engines has given the Chinese an ability to catch up on the propulsion side, and you've seen great investments by CATL and others. So I think there's still gaps, significant gaps. Tesla is still in many ways ahead, and in terms of luxury vehicles, the Chinese are really still getting started. And market share still shows that foreign companies and foreign brands are doing very well in China. I think in terms of responding to the current circumstances of zero COVID and the tensions, there's actually a lot of similarity across both foreign and Chinese companies. Everyone has taken the policy signal to electrify, and so we're seeing that. Certainly the Chinese maybe have moved even faster than foreign companies, but compared to 3 years ago, I think I don't know of a global automaker that is not electrifying their fleet in significant portions of it, and we will continue to see that. I do think folks are looking at ways to have duplicative supply chains for different parts of their vehicles, because they're not sure where U.S.-China relations are going to go in terms of export controls or other types of restrictions. And so everyone is now preparing for dealing with a world that has many kinds of restrictions and limits on it from geopolitical perspective. And I think you're seeing that from both foreign and Chinese automakers.
Yeah, very, very good, Scott. Yeah, I think that was one of the big issues that we've talked about in our conversations with in our conferences over the recent past, was whether the effects of the restrictions that are going on either through tariffs or trade wars, whatever, that there has the potential to have kind of a Cold War mentality. There's a lot of analysts who really poo-poo that, saying that, as you were talking about, the integration of so many businesses within China and between China and the rest of the world, that it would makes it a lot less likely. Do you agree with that?
I think it's going to be a mix of both. I think we'll still see a significant amount of collaboration. And I think foreign automakers aren't going to be immediately closed out of the Chinese market. There's still too much mutual dependence. The Chinese, if they tried to go it alone today, they'd still be at a huge disadvantage in a variety of areas. And I think those relationships have some enduring elements to them, benefits to both the Chinese and the foreign automakers. At the same time, I do think that national security is going to increasingly start to creep into this sector more and more. as we move towards autonomy, electric, hydrogen. You're going to hear more about that. I know that there is essentially a unwritten policy, for example, that Tesla vehicles can't go into Chinese government compounds because they're worried about the data that they collect once they drive into there. So they've basically been banned. Autonomous, I think GM probably is, knows more than anyone, the difficult, or Cruise, that you can't, that's very difficult to get, detailed maps that you would use for autonomous vehicles in China. If you're a foreign automaker, you really have to have a Chinese partner to do that. There's also going to be starting licensing for robo-taxis, other kinds of services in China. I think the Chinese government is going to restrict those on national security foundations. And I think you may start to see that in the US with some, with Pony AI and others who have been trying to operate it in the US. So I expect we're going to see a combination of continued cooperation, but national security and some elements of just simply straight up competition affecting business quite a bit.
It's a very interesting perspective, Scott. Thanks for your insight on that. It really is going to be a certain amount of balance going on between those,
Sure.
as opposed to all-out war, right?
Yes.
Very good. Well, I'm going to let you go because you got 10:30. We don't want to overstep our bounds here. But thanks a lot for taking the time. We appreciate it. Scott, I think I will put your email address out there for people who are attending so that they can, you could put it on your, if you wanted to, you could put it on your slides. And then if you send me a copy of the slides, I'll post that so they'll have access to it.
Yeah, I'll do that. Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. Sorry that I can't be here for the entire conference, but it's an industry I care a lot about, and so but I'm still in the middle of learning, and I know most people who are watching and contributing today know a lot more about about the auto sector than I do. So really feel free to reach out anytime, anybody. And Bruce, thank you for the chance to share today.
Yeah, also I want to thank you from the center. We've had really good support from your center for our discussions about China, and I was glad we were able to get you on board. We've been trying for a couple of years to have you present as well, but your colleagues have been carrying the ball very well.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it, and let's just stay in touch. Okay.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. Professor Wu, can you are you still with us?
Yes, I just
Okay, very
listen to
good.
the thoughts.
But
I may leave in a couple of minutes. Okay.
Okay. Well, let's see if we can you can answer a few questions for us. Okay.
Yes, if there's some question, I would like to
Very
see.
good. One of the things that you were looking at was the combination of sources of power, and it was kind of noticeable that there's just going to be a certain amount of growth in nuclear power. It probably in the I think you're going out to 2060, but also by 2030 you're expecting a little more for nuclear power. Do you see that as being a larger growing portion of power being used in China?
Yeah, actually in China, that's not as much debate as in the US or Europe or in Japan. So nuclear waste is considered to be a big disadvantage for nuclear. But in China, I think the debate on nuclear is much less. Based on the current plan for the nuclear power, we see their contribution will slowly and very gradually increase, but I don't think their share will be increased to up to more than 10%. Some could be some number, but 5 to 6%, I think, is pretty much a reasonable guess for that.
Okay. One of our attendees today asked a question: is there a formal published government plan with goals for switching from coal power?
Sorry, so switch coal power to what?
Is there from switching from coal power to other technologies?
Oh, actually, when you see over the past 10 years, especially for the past 5 years, we see the switch from coal power to other renewable power, especially the solar and wind, is speeding up. It's speeding up. But yeah, you know, there's some uncertainty. Now they are talking about how to clean the coal power, especially in you see a more and more competition between coal power and with other renewable. Currently, the coal power industry, they are also talking about with the CCS, the coal power could still contribute some share. Yeah.
Yes, very good.
Yeah.
You mentioned in one of your slides when you were looking at 2030, there is a category called other that is representing about 30%. Is that renewables or is
Yes,
that
renewable.
is that renewables?
Renewable.
Yeah.
Mostly wind and solar.
I'm sorry, mostly what?
Wind and solar.
Wind and
Yeah,
solar.
wind and solar power.
Yeah.
Supplemented by some small amount of the biomass.
Are there certain parts of the country that are more applicable for solar and wind than in others? It's true here in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For China, they are pushing very hard. Yeah.
Okay. Here's a technical question for you.
Okay.
This has to do with your LCA analysis. When you're evaluating CO2 emissions from a power plant for LCA, do you use average CO2 or do you use marginal CO2? It says average CO2 emissions are not accurate numbers for EVs. CO2's assessment and can EV have advantages for CO2 LCA. So when you talk about I guess the main question is, when you're evaluating CO2 emissions from power plants for your LCA, do you use average CO2 or marginal CO2?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. Actually, there's a lot of debate in this topic. To be honest, for most of the previous studies in China, including our studies and also other studies, they pretty much focus on average, so not in the marginal. But you can envision, so if we use the marginal generation mix, you will provide more benefit to electric vehicles, because in terms of marginal, we see more renewable. Yeah. But okay, currently for marginal, in China, it's tough to get very detailed marginal data.
Okay.
So that's something needs to dig into. Yeah.
Here's another LCA question. When you're in your LCA, are you including mining as well as processing of lithium and other metals for EVs as energy inputs?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Yeah. I know that China is a leader in processing the materials for electric vehicles. So I was wondering, is that considered a very high intensity energy process?
Yeah. For most of the processing for those, for example, for aluminum, copper, and nickel, they are very energy intensive. So that's why actually, if you look into the strategy for those industry chains, they are also thinking about how to build the so-called the green plants or the low carbon plants.
Mhm.
So I just show you an example. Scott mentioned this biggest battery company, Cattle, right? And they built a plant, a battery assembly plant in Sichuan province, in a city, because in that city they have a very rich hydropower,
Mm.
water power. So they can use because the water power is pretty much zero carbon burdens. So
Yeah.
yeah, so they use the hydropower to provide the so-called the zero carbon emissions for the battery assembly plant.
And what we're seeing in some of the developments of the new battery plants that we're seeing here in the US is that the companies are setting up recycling plants right next to the battery plants, because they're expecting over time, as the growth of batteries increases, that they will be able to recycle a high percentage of the materials from the used batteries to be used in the new batteries. When you were doing your LCA, were you taking recycling into account?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question. So far, we did not include the recycling, and actually, we are collecting the data for the recycling, and it's just a start for China. Yeah.
One question that we had from our audience had to do with the steps that countries have to take to be able to move away from coal. Are there some fundamental process steps that the government is taking to make this transition away from coal?
Yeah, but because if we target for 2060 by carbon neutrality, so the coal is definitely will be stepped down before that time period. Currently, we are seeking the transition from power. The power cleanness will be earlier than other sectors such as industrial and transportation, because at the first you need to provide the clean power, then your industry and transportation could be getting cleaner. So our envision is by there's a couple of analysis from the energy research institutions from China, and I see the most of the analysis they are targeting for 2040 or 2045. The coal will be stepped down. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things they're doing. I'm sorry.
But as I mentioned, coal power industry, they are also fighting. So if with the CCS, this is another story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do in the US, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully, is provide incentives for the power companies to make the transition. In our case, they're moving probably from coal to natural gas, and that's becomes one way that institutionally from the central government, from the federal government, to try to move the power companies, because they, as you know, they have tremendous large investments in power generation, and they have to, well, at least in the U.S., they want to be profitable. I don't know, in China, it may or may not be the case, but they want to be profitable, so they don't want to make this change unless they feel that they can stay profitable as companies.
Yeah, actually, it's simply my personal opinion, because you see, over the past couple of years, we still have the new build coal power plants. So in terms of its lifetime span, it should stay with another 30 years. So I envision for this new build coal power plants, if they want to survive by 2040 or 2050, they have to seriously consider about the CCS. So which means just like the air pollution control, you see the past 10 or 15 years. So we have the FGD for the sulfur dioxide, we have the filters for the particles, and we have the SCR for NOx. So eventually, I will envision for those coal power plants, they will install with CCS, trying to extend their survival time.
Yeah. I think that was one of the areas, questions that one of the previous questions were focusing on. You know, is there kind of government policy that says no more building of coal power plants? You know, we're not going to do this anymore. But I know that when Michael Wang spoke a couple of years ago, he was telling us, as you say as well, they're still building coal power plants. So obviously there's not as strong a government push or requirement that said, no more of this stuff, right?
Yeah, that's going to be a very tough decision for. Actually, it's not simply the central government, because the local government, if they have very rich coal resources, they always have some you know, some driving forces to try to build the new.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's sometimes the most difficult thing to overcome. To move away from something where you have a lot of these resources, but changing to another resource that you may not have as much of, and that becomes a challenge for the companies to be able to make that transition. Okay, Dr. Wu, I think we're going to let you go now. I want to again thank you very much for taking the time. I know it's late at night in Beijing right now. But we will continue on today. We're still in the middle of our program. Again, thank you very much, and we'll be in touch very soon. Take care.
Thank you, Bruce.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, now let's take our break. Okay. Let's start with that. I want to start to begin this session, Carrie, to make a double check, make sure we're working on YouTube. I think we are still. All right, I want to follow up on a couple questions that came about from my presentation. It says you referenced 25% tariffs for importing vehicles into China. Do you see that changing? No, I do not see that changing. Does that also apply to major component parts? It depends on the components. Some components are tariffed and others are not. Here's a question. There was a trade war between the US and Japan in the 1980s and 90s, and Japanese OEMs were selling inexpensive, high quality cars in the US. When China OEMs make inroads into the US, do you think they can attract the Americans for quality cars? And I think that the introduction of Chinese vehicles in the US will probably not be internal combustion engine vehicles. They'll probably be NEVs. And they will probably be, and then they will potentially be very competitive if the US automakers and the other automakers in the US that are selling in the US are not as competitive themselves in EVs. The EV story is growing and throughout in the EU, US, and China. And really, that's just the lead-in to the next presentation I want to give on our EV Evolutions program. This is a research program that we've been working on for about since 2016, 2017, where we've just been continuing to learn a lot about in particular, the Chinese automotive industry, NEV industry, because they were leading the charge here. So we followed policy and consumers and manufacturer strategies since then. And just now we're starting to putting this stuff out onto our website. So there'll be an EV Evolutions portion of our website for our affiliates. They'll be getting information faster than we're making it public to everyone else. So that's going to be our process. Our EV Evolution researchers include Kara, who's working on US battery companies, also mining and recycling as well. Our other students are working on China, the US, and the EU. So we're trying to cross a lot of boundaries here in terms of what we're going to be looking at. Markets, production and sales, battery technology, battery materials, mining processes and recycling, charging, government policies, consumer views and behavior, as well as company strategies. All this will be rolled in as output and put onto a website for people to check out. We'll be sending information out to our affiliates about what we're putting up, but we'll also be displaying that information at our conferences, which is what we're doing today. As I said, China, US, and EU are the regions that we're looking at. And today I'm really just going to be focusing on China because it's the Inside China Conference. The chart that you saw from Scott is this chart that follows the sales growth, particularly from 2020 and for 2022, the growth of NEVs, but also notice that downturn in April for this year. And whenever you see those sharp downturns, those are lockdowns. And that's what's causing the lockdowns in those, the decline in sales in those vehicles. You're looking at the annual sales by year, again, showing the growth to 3.5 million last year. And this year they're talking about potentially 6 million vehicles. In the first half of 2022 represented almost 22% of all new vehicle sales. But as Scott was talking about, and some of our other colleagues have been talking about, this the other parts of the industry may not be doing as well. We don't have as a good sense of sales for the whole year for internal combustion engines, but we'll know pretty soon. So when you look at BYD, for example, you can see the difference between 21 and 22. Tremendous growth. BYD made a decision last year. I think it was last July. They said no more internal combustion engine vehicles. We're only selling NEVs. Oh, it really helps if you share your slides, Bruce. This is there you go. Okay, quick review for people who didn't see the previous slides. The China monthly, in terms of 2021-22 growth rates, the EV penetrations for the various years, very successful over the last 2 years. The differences between BYD for 21 and 22, again, pretty much mirrors the growth of NEVs. But then you look at what happened with Tesla, and especially for what happened in 2022. And here you can see the significant reduction, and this was because of lockdowns. And yet, because of that, they're still doing quite well compared to 2021. But at those months of July and April really hurt them. All right. One of the things that the Chinese are doing is that they're selling dramatically in Europe. BYD, they have vehicles that are going to, let's get this up here. They've got vehicles that they're selling in Europe. This is from the recent Paris Auto Show. One of the things that's pretty striking is pricing for these, very similar to the US, where electric vehicles are not inexpensive. They're quite expensive vehicles. But these, you can see the designs are very, very good. They'll be selling these in Europe. This is the BYD offerings. Great Wall has their own brand called Aura. This is what they're going to be selling in Europe, looking at 2023. And they've also been reaching out to other countries, Norway in particular, because we know that Norway has this a very aggressive, one could argue regressive tax policy that says if you buy an internal combustion engine vehicle, you have to pay more than you have to pay like almost like a tax, an extra tax for buying an internal combustion engine. Because of that, they've been selling EVs like crazy in Norway. So in Norway, it's probably EVs are representing something like 70% of new vehicle sales. So this is one of the companies from China that's selling there. Great Wall is selling there. NIO is also setting up in Norway, as on the continent as well. The Geely and Polestar, of course, Polestar was a brand that came out of Volvo, and which is a Swedish brand, but owned by Geely. So you can see that they're making their inroads into Europe. BYD also going into Norway, and AWI's also into Europe, and in particular into Italy. And Marvel R, which is again another Chinese brand, is also selling in Europe. So this over the last couple months, China became the second largest exporter of vehicles globally. So total exports from the first 3 quarters reached 2.1 million units, up 55% year on year, and for a total for more than the total of 2021, the first year that China's vehicle exports reached 2 million vehicles, and they're not even in the U.S. So it's going to show you that they overtook Germany as the world's second largest vehicle exporter. Now, one reason that many companies are not really huge on exporting is because they're building in those countries, which is where, Japan exports a lot to the U.S., but they build a lot in the U.S. as well. So, and NEVs represented a pretty good chunk of that. Sorry, NEVs represent a pretty good chunk of that of those exports, particularly to Belgium, United Kingdom, and Thailand. So, company profits. When you look at some of the major Chinese companies, EV companies, BYD, Tesla, NIO, and Li, you can see that there really are some big differences in terms of net income, and followed by gross profit. So companies aren't being profitable, but some companies are being more profitable than others. This kind of goes a little bit against what Scott was saying, but I think it's one of the issues that we'll be following over the years. So in terms of batteries and charging, So the number of, in terms of this past January, there were 2.7 million charging, they call them piles, it's really chargers, deployed across China. This is a big issue that's being supported by the local governments, but also central government. They've also been starting to get into battery swapping stations. So swapping stations was something that was started way back in I think what was that? That would probably be early 2000s with the Nissan Leaf in Israel. And Nissan was testing out, swapping out batteries, and they abandoned it. But the Chinese are giving it a shot again to see if it's going to make sense. Kind of started out with the Neo brand, luxury brand vehicle. They're probably the leaders, but other companies and the federal central government is supporting it. So the number of chargers compared for this is for all of 2021. You look at public, private, and total. Dramatic numbers of increases in number of chargers. 2 million total, private and public. These are estimates, of course. But when you think about the US, where they're talking about having 500,000 by 2030, it shows you how much work still needs to be done in this area. Here's a map of one of where all the chargers are located, how many are located in all the different provinces, including Beijing, where you have like 96,000 chargers, and Shanghai, I think, is down here with 103,000 chargers. I mean, it really shows you that the growth of the charging units that are required for EVs and that the government's supporting. All right, but like in any places, sometimes you just don't have enough chargers, and this is something that we're going to have to deal with in the U.S. as well. On a national holiday in China, they had people waiting in lines for 4 hours to get a charge that lasted for 1 hour. So the original 8-hour drive took almost 16 hours. So that's one of the things that is that we're going to have to be able to deal with in terms of the growth of EVs. When you look at battery companies, it's really a duopoly. You have CATL and BYD, and then there's everybody else. CATL are the leader in battery installed capacity. This is for 2021. Major growth compared to the other companies. And BYD is interesting because they're the only company that's a battery company and a car company at the same time. There's no other companies that actually build their own batteries. And so BYD is a kind of a poster child for looking at how do you deal with dealing with batteries. It's something we have to consider for the rest of the auto industry as well, where you're looking at will manufacturers somewhere along the way say, you know, we should be doing this ourselves, and start the process. But then what will it do to a lot of their joint ventures? So it's an interesting story that we're going to be following. When you look at the battery companies, there's strengths and weaknesses. They all have different features, advantages, and the types of technologies that they're showing. Again, you're looking at some of the major ones. LG, Korean, S-Volt is, Kara, where is S-Volt from? Remember? Are they European? I think they're European. Aeon is Chinese. CATL, BYD, Chinese, Tesla, US and China, and CATL is Chinese. And because CATL is so big, they've actually started their own battery swapping program called EvoGo, and that it's really just them testing out the strategy. Is modular? They're taking it another step further by looking at modular battery swapping. So you have 3 products. You have a battery block, So a battery specifically developed for EV battery sharing, the fast battery swapping station, and an app. They have a single block can offer up to 200 kilometers of range, compatible with most vehicle models riding on BEV platforms. But the only reason CATL can say this is because they dominate the market, and most of the EV companies are buying their battery from them. It's flexible. They can install 1, 2, or 3 blocks on their cars based on the different range requirements. And there's a minimalist design using wireless battery management system technology. Does not have any parts on the exterior except the high voltage positive and negative terminals. And it has a lot of adaptations. The standard station is small. It takes up only 3 parking spaces and can store up to 48 of the blocks, and allows 1 minute swap for a single battery pack. Again, this is just CATL testing things out and say, well, this work, can we do this? You know, so a user can say, well, I don't need to pay as much. I only need 1 block, and because I only drive locally. But if you're going to do a long distance trip, well, then you can go at 2 or 3 blocks. All right, materials and recycling. The chairman of BYD said that the mainland's lithium oil ore resources can meet the electrification of 300 million vehicles, but the current mining is slow and the market supply is tight. So this is something that they feel that this is the rising prices of raw material prices, especially for lithium, has really been growing over the last year or so. Some of it has to do with COVID. Sometimes some of it has to do with more companies wanting access to these materials. And then the material and the mining people saying, this is our opportunity to make some money, so we're going to actually charge more for the product because it's in demand. Now, the other issue has to do with recoverable reserves of lithium resources can reach 3 billion cars. China estimates that by 2040 and 2045, there will be about 300 million new energy vehicles. And to a certain extent, the material can start to circulate. So you can have this, what you would call a virtuous cycle and this is one of the things that I was talking about Professor Wu about, where some of the battery companies, when they're setting up in a country, they're setting a recycling station, a plant right next to it to get the process going. So that they estimate that in 2050, half of the materials should be recycled. So you really won't need as much raw material as you do right now, but in the future, it will then decrease pricing. And I think that's what we're talking about here. He says that industry professionals also predict that the demand for short-term lithium resources will continue to rise, but the global mining progress of lithium resources is also accelerating. Therefore, it's predicted that by 2023, which is just next year, supply shortage trend is expected to ease and other factors increase or are limited. Before 2025, the industry may be oversupplied and lithium prices may decline significantly. This is something that they were hoping for in the past, but recently because lithium prices did come down a lot, see around 2020, but then there was a shortage and the prices went up. And so there's some catch up that's being made here, and it's kind of forcing the companies to look into more sources for lithium. This is something that Kara's been studying over the last few months, kind of focusing on where are in North America, where are the potential lithium mines and how much is actually available. And the other thing that they mentioned was that in the future, with continuous development of power battery technology, such as the maturity of solid state battery technology routes, it will also be possible to replace existing technological routes and reduce resource requirements. And this is something that Dr. Wu is talking about, where he said that they have been able in relatively short period of time to increase the battery density and decrease the amount of materials to get that same amount of power. It's something that we always talk about this because we knew it's going to happen, that the industry is going to put a lot of money into R&D to figure out the best way to do these things. And this is why we always enjoy watching the manufacturers and the supply base, because once you give them a challenge, they will actually go out and really put forth a huge effort and a lot of money to try to solve it. And many times they can. Also the recycling strategies vary by, and here you're looking at the recycling of sometimes the manufacturers, but also the battery companies themselves. So that's all I wanted to talk about in terms of our EV Evolutions program. So these are the kinds of things that we're going to be putting out on the website. Try to keep things as up to date as possible about what we're learning. We're also going to have some historical stuff up there because we've been studying kind of like the Chinese policies from the central government starting around 2016, and things have changed from then to now. And so kind of following that path will be interesting. And some, as you actually can see, some of the other countries and regions kind of learning from what has happened in China. Okay, I think we're going to move on to but I guess we can do we could do Q&A. If you have question cards, Kara can pick those up. Kara, do we have any questions online? We don't have any questions online. So we can do this after we're done with as part of our continuing discussion with our other speakers. And let me introduce our next speaker. Next speaker, Song Liu, is the Senior Program Manager in Valeo, North America. He leads programs across countries of China, USA, Mexico, and multiple Europe countries in the business unit of comfortable and driving assistance of Valeo. He manages program teams in different territories and roles and formalizes global task forces toward customer delivery and satisfaction. Prior to this role, he was responsible for Valeo powertrain business in China. He's just coming back from a 7-year stint in China. He is deeply involved in different segments of new energy market development, including mild hybrid powertrain systems and battery EV systems with many Chinese local OEMs and international OEMs. So he'll be able to give us some insight about what he sees happening in China. Sean, let's have you tell the story. We're going to use your presentation that you sent me and to do this in full screen mode. And I think you're ready. Oh, no, we must share our screens. I could say I learned from my mistakes, but I've done this one too many times to. Okay. It's in full screen mode. And I think we're ready to go. Take it away, Son.
Thank you, Bruce. All right, thank you, everyone. My name is Song Liu, and as Bruce introduced, I've been working in automotive industries for 22 years by this year. Okay, thank you. And including the OEM, position in OEM and position in the component supplier. Now I'm in the Valeo North American team, and I'm senior program manager, managing all the business in the project development and the resources team in China and United States, also including Mexico. So hopefully I'm the only one who's speaking as of today as from industrial field, and as you can see of the previous speakers, they are from university, from research and institute. But hey, hopefully I can bring some of useful information to everyone. All right. Okay, so we Valeo is a European-based company, and we have 4 well-balanced business group in the global wide for comfortable driving assistance system, powertrain, thermal, and visibility. And also we have a transversal business group of Valeo service. Okay, and what we are doing? So we Valeo as automotive supplier, we don't make cars, but we're providing all the components to the all the OEMs. So thanks to company strategies, we are making the value creations for OEM in electrification, in ADAS, lighting, and the interior, also trying to improve our customers' interior experience. So this is what we are doing. And overall speaking, in the year of 2021, so we have more than just a little slightly more than 100,000 employees global wide, and we are making 17.3 billion sales in over 32 countries. And who we are working with, basically we are working with everyone in the global wide, in China, in Europe, and also in the American, and see there is we are working with all the OEMs. All right, thanks to the Chief Executive Officer Christoph mentioning about, we are determined to, with moving up strategy, we are creating more values now, and creating stronger groups from providing our customers with a mobility solution to the mobility revolution, and also to target to create more values to our customers. And with all the investment and efforts in the automotive industries, we are the #1 in electrification, which means that we have 1 vehicle out of 3 on the road, which is equipped with Valeo electronic solutions. And also we are the #1 in the ADAS area, which means 1 of the 3 cars on the road worldwide is equipped with Valeo ADAS solutions from level 0 to level 1, level 2, and even level 2+. All right, so here is we have the footprint of Valeo as a global wide. We have footprint in Europe, in Asia, in North America, and South America as well. So I'm really proud, I'm really glad to tell everyone that more than 55% Valeo annual order intake, which is involved for innovations, which means that we are not only selling the commodities, we are selling our invention, we're selling our design, we're selling our creative products. All right, so in the electronic point of view, why we are saying that it's really important for Valeo, because we have more than 10 billion sales over every year with the electronic component. And we are the top 5 electronic component buyer in the automotive world. We make electronic innovations in powertrain, in comfort driving assistant, and thermal, and visibility, which means in all our 4 biggest business group, we are making a lot of efforts in the design, develop, and we create a lot of values to our customer, to our OEM customers, and finally, eventually to the consumers in the world. Okay, beside of the product itself, in the mechatronic, hardware, software, mechatronic parts, we also make a lot of efforts in software expertise. So we work with all the application software level, which is like Mobileye, Qualcomm, NVIDIA, and also with the core softwares and AutoStar, and even with the software foundry from toolchain, which means from the product point of view to component point of view, even to the fundamental layers of tool chains. I'm really proud to say that in Valeo, we have more than 40% of engineering teams that are software and system team based. So inside the USA, in Europe, and also in China, in global wide. All right, okay. So today's topic is same is what we do in China, and we want to use these two words to present what Valeo is doing there in China. We have strong roots in China, which we in China, and we do it for China. All right, okay. So let's give back a little bit, looking at what Chinese automotive production looks like. So we know that in the year of 2021, there are 72.8 million vehicles global wide in the global, and somehow China is 29% of it, which means as a unique country, China is the largest automotive market in the global wide. So it's the most important market, and it's one of the largest market in global wide. Well, I think many of the previous speakers already talk about the overall market in China. I want to bring a little bit more insight into the internal, we call it internal combustion engine, we call it ICE vehicles, and then the new vehicle energies, new energy vehicles. So if the chart on the left side is very interesting if you're looking at it. Starting from 2018, there is a slightly decreasing on the overall volumes in China. Yes, because of the COVID, because of the economic changes. But if you look at the new energy vehicles on the white area, so by the year of 21, this is a real volumes of 17.3%, and by the year of 22 is the YTD today, and plus of some of the forecast. And we see that in this year, in 2022, we're going to see more than 30% of the overall vehicles will be new energy vehicles. And the rate is continue going up, and we believe by the year of 2026, it's going to be more than 50% of the new vehicles selling in China. So that means with the previous couple of years before that, they were going to set 30% of totally Chinese vehicle volumes will be more than new energy vehicle will take more than 30% of the portion, and it's going to be implemented by. It's certainly going to be implemented. It will be there by year 2022. So that's giving us a quite clear message saying that in China, the electronic or electrification vehicles and new energy vehicles, they're accelerating. And the trend is very significant, very clearly message to everyone in the automotive field, saying that the year has become as 2022. All right, then what we're doing in China. So as an automotive supplier, what we're seeing in China, what is happening over there. So we see that all the OEMs, they're working on their autonomous driving, and either in-house development or work with some third-party company, for example, like Scott Kenny was introducing Momenta. Momenta is well known in China for their autonomous driving strategies and algorithms. And we know that a lot of cars are equipped with a level 2 autopilot, and even some of them are trying to exploring the market of a level 4. So they're using them in some of the robo-taxi vehicles, and know that they are testing these cars in Shanghai, in Suzhou, and even in Guangzhou or some of the modern cities. And we know that from a technology point of view, the LiDAR, and the long-range and mid-range radar, they are going to emerge, and they're going to take the market position, and they're going to be more and more accepted by OEM and by consumers. And nevertheless, we, as Scott introduced, there is a big investment from government, from central government, by giving the subsidies, by giving the money, giving the investment to the charging station, to the battery maker, and to all the new energy vehicle players. So we see as long as the market is growing bigger and bigger, so there is always be a question: Is the subsidy going to continue, or is subsidy going to be cut off or will be stopped some of the days because the market is already big enough? And is it always possible to invest, if I remember correctly, the number was saying that 226 billion Chinese yuan into the market every year? Is that possible going to continue? So far, we don't have a clear answer by today, but as far as we see that in 22 and 23, the new energy subsidies is going to continue. Okay, from technology point of view, and what we are seeing now happening in China, so the high performance chipset, for example, Qualcomm, for example, of NVIDIA, and they are dominating the market because it's high tech chipset and high performance chipset bring all the benefit to vehicles, to the OEMs, and also seeing that every car, most of the EV car or NEV car, a new vehicle produced in China, it's going to be standard equipment with large LED screen, a very fancy interior, and a long dashboard with all the LED, all the screens, and from left to right side, and sometime of the is going to providing a 31-inch screens, high pixel, high density screens as well. And all of the cars, for example, like Great Wall and like GM cars and Ford cars, are providing even more digital cockpit and more kind of user-friendly interior interface, which means making the consumer really willing to sit in the car from a transportation device to entertainment device. Some of the car even providing a kit which we can make a karaoke inside the cars. Is that something what you need for transportation? No, it's more like PlayStation. It's more like a kind of entertainment center, entertainment device. And also, I believe there is also more connected cars like 5G utility in the cars, which means you can have a more V2X interactions. You can interface with the infrastructure, with the road, with facilities, with a bunch of resources. Which means the car is not only a transportation device. It's more like making a user-friendly. You are much more easier, much more willing to sit in the car and to have fun with the car. Right. Okay. Executive summary. Nevertheless, so we see opportunities, and also at the same time we see the headwinds. And it's clear as a summary. So we know that the BEV and the electrification market is accelerating in China. More and more vehicles is going to have a level 2, level 3, and level 4 ADAS, and also smart cocoons in the market. So this is going to emerge and going to accelerate even more. And but again, at the same time, we also see the headwinds. For example, Chip Act, which was just released in the United States, and I believe it's going to be deeply impact automotive market. What we'll do in the United States, what we're going to sell in China, and how we going to make sure the OEMs, GM, Ford, BYD, even how they're going to get the chipset in the future. And there is also a comeback, and also on the high tech companies, for example, like XPeng, are they going to facing a delist risk from NASDAQ? So it's always a risk, but somehow we are. This is the life we have to face. And even the trade war, we see that as the automotive supply revalue, we also see a big impact of the trade wars, like Bruce introduced, 25% of the tariff is already significantly hurting what is exporting from China to United States, and also there's countermeasures from China. They are also charging some of tariff from United States to China, and when we're going to find a peace. When we're going to find a handshake between the two countries and finally settle down agreement that it's going to help everyone, right? So all these headwinds, we believe will be there, and it will be there for a couple of years, and will significantly impacting and reshape the supply chain, reshape the industries. All right, okay, back into value, what we're doing in China. So in China, we have 19,000 employees, over 33 production sites and 13 R&D centers in China. And all the value of China sales is around about 16% to versus global sales. Yeah, it is we see China as still a big potential market to grow, especially for value business in China, because we still have a 16%, and there are still big potential to go. So that's in China, we have made a strong investment in China, a big investment in China. Also, we have 35% of development staffs, 3,500 R&D people in China, and we are determined, and we are setting our strategies is made in China, which is already we see in the last 20 years, we see that everything is made in China. But now we want to invent with China. So as the result, we set up a group R&D software center in Wuhan, and we're making a new mobility R&D innovation center in Beijing, and we are also setting up a system team, strong systematic team in Shanghai, etc. All right, so with all the innovations we are made in China, we have successfully released more than 1,448 patents in the year 2021. This is all the investment we have made. As I introduced, we are taking more than 55% of new order intake based on the innovations. What we're doing in China. So in terms of electrification, in ADAS, we are building all the components. For example, we're also bringing the technology and innovations to China, some high voltage EXOs, inverter, and or charger, to e-thermal environment, environment control, battery cooling, like heat pump, and even we are bringing the mild hybrid technologies. In ADAS, we are building the front camera, driver monitoring, near field LiDAR, etc. All the portfolios. This is what we are doing in China, and we're not providing only the hardware. We're also providing the software and those system solutions in China. All right. So nevertheless, we see pandemic still kind of a big issue in China. We're still in the middle of China, and according to COVID zero strategies, so which means everyone is impacted as long as you stay in China, and same as to Valeo. What we're doing in Valeo, and same as the previous speakers had mentioned, by the year of 2022, there's a strict lockdown in April, so we are seeing that we locked more than 50% of the volume in China. But at the same time, we see when the lockdown lifted off, when the life coming to normal life, we see the market coming to resilient, which means the significant increasing in the months of May, in the months of June, in the month of July, even in the last months of September, we see a big bouncing back on the volume, on the demand. So which means the market is resilient. There is still demand, high demand in the market. So to protect our supply chain, to protect our peoples, so Valeo had implemented a lot of strategies, a lot of rehearsal, a lot of activities to including a closed loop productions. So we bring people back into to plant sometime urgently, and the people bring their camping kit, say the camping kit inside their office. So they stay in the office for overnight and stay there for just to maintain the production can be happening. And even with the pandemic, with the lockdown influence, and we work with logistics team, we work with the shipping companies to ship out the parts at the urgency status when we see any impact will happen in the next couple of hours. So somehow we are proud. We are very happy, very proud to tell our customers, tell the people is we have 0 customer lying down because of value. This is even in the past 3 years in the pandemic area. So this is really a big activity, big jobs, and we have also 0 COVID case inside the Valeo China. So that's making us really really proud to announce that. All right, okay. So I want to summarize my presentation. So what is the most important to our team? I would say the most important to Valeo is our team. And I want to end up my presentation with the group values. And we stay transparency. We honor our ethics, and we empower our people, our team, and we're providing our product and providing our service to our customer with professional, and we work as team. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, thank you, Song. Yeah. We'll do some Q&A right now. Okay. Now, I got some questions for you, and if the audience has questions, Kara will be collecting cards. One of the things that struck me when I was looking through your presentation was the number of patents, and that was very impressive. And in the past, China's had companies have had problems with intellectual property theft. How do you guys manage that? How do you control your IP so that it doesn't get stolen?
Right, it's a very good question. We know that there has always been a debate on the intellectual properties and IP properties, and for our company like Valeo, we honor the intellectual properties, and we work closely with all the partners, which are with our OEMs and also with the partners, and we most of the innovations we are protected by the patent, and we go to apply the patents inside of Valeo, inside of global wide in Europe, and well, luckily is we're working with our Chinese customers in China and Europe and in North America. So we carefully define the boundaries of the IP knowledges, and we work with them and share with them. And so far, as far as I know, we see quite a lot of dispute or argument on debate on that. So.
Okay. You also talked about sourcing as a potential, as an issue going forward. Are you guys going to, do you see yourselves doing more dual sourcing on components to be able to manage any kind of problems that you have, maybe even globally on components?
I agree. That's I have frankly speaking, as most of my past 1 year or 2 years job is working on the to keep the production running and keep the resilient supply chain, and this will be one of my biggest challenge. I already spent most of my time working in US based, but managing all the activities in China and also in Europe. So we developed the dual source, and sometimes in the high volume demanding component, we also manage the tri source on the obviously, of course, it costs a lot of time, a lot of cost, a lot of energy to validate, to prove the product, and and also to sometimes to convince our customers that we absolutely need to have a backup plan, have a dual source or maybe tri-source and triple source. It takes a lot of time and energy to do that. And so far, that's why I'm really happy and proud to say that there's not as a pandemic ever since 2020, and there are all the severe challenges on the supply chain. We are happy to announce, happy also proud to say that none of car production is stopped by Valeo.
That's impressive. And in the lockdown era, that's impressive.
Yeah, you see that all the camping kits, people are bringing out the camping kit and making the camping in the office. I would say it's never easy. I myself also experienced one time when I was in China. It's not the easy days. It's not happy camping, right? But it is what we have to do to protect our customers and also protect the supply chain.
Right. That's it's difficult to imagine that happening in the U.S. So let's see, do we have some other questions for you? When you look at the Chinese market from the manufacturers, because you're supplying both foreign manufacturers and domestic manufacturers, which of the domestic manufacturers do you see are the probably most likely candidates to actually come to the U.S.?
Yeah, that's I would say that's also a good question. Who is going to be next to enter the United States?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And if we look at the NASDAQ market, we know that XPeng and NIO, they are all listed in the NASDAQ. You will say this is a Chinese company? I would say yes, but I would say it's mixed. It's a mix of Chinese company and the United States company. Because it's listed in NASDAQ. It's kind of financed or supported by the U.S. investment, right? So these are the new players in the world. I would say I agree with one of your statements, Bruce, is saying that the one who likely to come to United States may be not on ICE vehicles, because it's already Chinese OEMs has been already too much far away from mature US players like GM, like Ford, like Volkswagen, like BMW. They're too much far away. But on the new energy vehicle, EV cars, they have more better chance to enter.
And better opportunities.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very good. Let's see, what else do we got here? So you've talked about the disruptions that the lockdowns have caused for your company. And we saw some of those disruptions in the data, that April and May were probably not good months for this. When you look at what I think what's interesting is, and I think you have it in your slides, the resilience of the market, so that when the lockdowns ended, the production came back.
That's right.
And it looks like you were the estimates that you were giving look like this year was actually overall going to be better than last year. Some of my colleagues are not convinced. Scott doesn't sound like he was convinced either. But is that your feeling as well, that you think that 2022 is actually going to be a better year than 2021?
Yeah, so far with the data we have collected, it's showing that year of 22 is going to have higher volumes than compared to 21, and which means the market, there's always the people requiring better life, even after pandemic. People are more enjoying the more willing to spend money to buy more cars, and this is exactly we are seeing. I also want to give one of the data to everyone that as a supplier based, we have seen over record sales after the lockdown in April and May, which means starting from June, July, August, September, and October. Every month, our sales, Valeo China sales is hitting the records, which means every month we're building more components, we're selling more components thanks to the high demand from the OEMs. So when we are shipping more components, I'm certainly sure our OEMs, they are building more cars because of the high demand from the market.
Yeah, and I think that really is a very good indicator of sales.
It's still the biggest market in the world, and it's still the most resilient market in the world.
And it's impressive that, despite the lockdowns, that the sales will be as high as they are, and it really tells you that people are not being injured they're being injured a bit by the lockdowns, but they still have the people themselves are resilient within their lives, and as you said, they want to continue living their lives.
Yes,
and
the life will continue, and the days are going to be back, and not really back to normal, but hopefully next couple of months. But what I want to say is, with the recovery from the pandemic and lockdown, who is the biggest winner? It's the new energy vehicle player, like BYD, like you said, the BYD, like Tesla, like Xpeng and NIO, and all these new energy vehicle players. They are seeing a big, high demanding or quick bouncing back of their productions.
One of the things that we've seen in the U.S. because of the pandemic is a reduction of use of public transport. And therefore an increase in individuals driving their own vehicles. Yes. Is that also true in China?
Yeah, that's exactly. Because say after the pandemic, people are much more willing to travel to take entertainment time with their own cars. It's not instead of by the public transportations.
Yeah. And even though China has pretty good public transportation systems, but the same kind of issue where people are feel more comfortable in pandemic wise in their own vehicles. Yeah, very good. All right, Sang, thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, Sung, and also if you want to be in on Shiju's Q&A after she's done with her presentation, feel free to jump in if you have something you want to add. Shiju, are you with us?
Yes, Bruce, I'm here.
Well, thank you for hanging around.
No, it was very interesting, and the topics are very vast. And we see also aspects from people who are Chinese, who have been to China recently, and me since November 2019, I haven't still been able to go back to China. So I'm more outsider than insider at the moment.
Yeah. Well, let me do a little introduction for you.
Okay.
Xu Wang is an associate researcher at the Center for Research and Economy at the University of Paris North, and also a group called the Bridge Tank in Paris, and a member of the program on emerging economies in Torino, Italy. She's been a research fellow at the Interdisciplinary Institute for Innovation of École Polytechnique de Paris and the Department of Economics and Statistics at the University of Turin. Her research interests include automotive industry, energy and mobility transitions, innovation management, and the Chinese economy. She holds a master's in financial engineering from the University of Paris and a PhD in economics from the University of Sorbonne in Paris, with specialization in the domain of private equity. Besides research, she also works as a consultant for international business development projects. Welcome, Xiju.
Thank you, Bruce. Shall I share my slides?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I have a sore throat in these days. Okay, can you see my slides now?
Yes, we're looking good. Yeah, you could probably put it on
okay,
slideshow.
Okay. Well,
There you go.
Yes. So I'm very honored to be part of the speakers of today's discussion, and I'm absolutely very happy to share all what I know and welcome all the questions and exchanges even after the conference. So I will go directly into my topic. The central topic of my presentation will be the EV battery value chain in China, especially located in China. What are the elements that have contributed to the fast growth of this industry in China, and what are the future challenges? So I will probably jump over this slide that we have already seen through previous presentations about the importance of the Chinese market regarding EV, and also the recent increasing export from Chinese EV makers towards the world, especially in Europe and also in Asia. Let me focus, in my topic. Yes, so maybe everybody here present is aware of the importance of Chinese EV and also the battery firms in China. That because of the market demands is very strong in China, because of the policy support that we have seen since 2014. So since also the fast growth of the EV market in China, parallelly, we have also seen the fast growth in the battery industry. Now we say that China presents more than 2/3 of the global capacity of battery production. Previously, we have also looked with other presentations the type of batteries that are mainly used in China. They are LFP and also the NCM. They are the main major types. But currently, we're also doing other experiments about, for example, solid battery and other more advanced technologies. So the competition also continues regarding the battery technology of the future. So the technology changes, and also the landscape of the actors. Back in 2015, there were over 240 battery firms. We're talking about only end producers. So not counting all the intermediary suppliers. So we had 240 battery firms in China. And the data in 2020 showed that the number was rapidly reduced. So there were only 50 companies that were surviving at the moment. And this number continued to evolve, and the concentration of the market actually intensify every year. So this tells that Chinese battery industry is already quite dynamic, active, and also it's undergoing the consolidation. So bigger firms with stronger technology and also bigger capacity, so also has a price advantage. They can also try to chase out the smaller players and try to consolidate the capacity and also the sources that are available for this market, because we know that the raw materials are also a quite big problem for the sector of battery. So if we show this in numbers, we saw this rapid growth of battery production and sales in China. We saw in this table that the top players in China, actually, they had a very concentrated market share, which continues to grow every year. And in data back to 2020 show that the top 10 Chinese battery firms occupied almost more than 92% of the total battery production capacity installed. Okay, let's move on. So why there are so much dynamics and so much active players that are in this Chinese market? We already mentioned the market demand is strong. This is fundamental. but that is not enough. We also need policy support, which is a case of China with a strong government intervention. We can say that it's really policy lead and guided. It's manifested in different aspects that Bruce has also showed us. The charging stations, China had maybe the most intensive charging stations in the world, even though it's still not enough. And the government, both central and the local governments, are also investing massively still now to increase this ratio of charging station compared to vehicles. We had, until now, we still have subsidies for EV purchase, for different kinds of tax reduction, and we had also different practical advantages for EV owners, for example, especially for the big cities like Beijing and Shanghai. They present really a strong advantage for practical reasons. For example, for the getting the driving lessons, especially, and also to have certain driving freedom inside the city during the week. I mentioned already there are important R&D program going on, not only inside the firm, but also at the national level. There with national fundings, with alliances together with companies and industrial associations, with experts and also academics. They are working together on these technologies. Very interesting aspects and especially important when we analyze China for the EV battery, is that quite different from Europe, where we had also requirements, especially regarding emission. We had the standards of emission. We had, for example, travel limits, but we don't give guidance on the technical aspects of the EVs. On the contrary, in China, the government, together with technical agencies, provided very specific guidelines for EV producers and battery firms in order to push them to update, to upgrade their technologies. So every year, we have seen, almost every year, at least once a year, we have seen publications of this kind of technology requirements for EVs, which required, for example, not only aspects like driving range, which is very standard, but also, for example, charge capacity, for example, battery energy consumption aspects. So there are also different requirements, not only for the driving, but also for the vehicle, its energy and its own compositions. So which push companies to evolve and continue to work to improve their models. Recently, we know that China has been continuously cutting its direct subsidies because it's a big burden for the government and it's not sustainable. And firms has to like the US ones, have to be commercial and marketly sustainable by themselves. So instead, the government are putting into place different programs to replace actually the direct subsidies. So we are talking about the NEV quota. So companies producing and selling a big amount of cars in China have to respect a certain quota representing in their vehicles. And China has now launching this year, I think, its national carbon emission trading system. So big company car producers are also required to participate in this kind of schemes in order to continue their business. Professor Wu earlier mentioned about the life cycle assessment that China also has imported, I think, collaborating with the European commissions and other different European agencies. So this is also a very encouraging aspect in the evolution of Chinese automobile industry. Well, okay, so this is more or less the part of policy, so government and also technical guidance. At the meantime, from the bottom up, if we look at the companies present in China, we see that they are not waiting for the government to help them. They have to invest, innovate, and to compete, not only with foreign firms, but also inside China with Chinese local firms. So there are some basic strategies they use. They have to invest a lot to increase the capacity in order to have price advantages. They have to provide different products. So product differentiation, especially collaborating together with the clients is very important. We see that CATL and BYD, they are working on different innovation of the battery designs, for example, because we know above certain intensity, you cannot improve so much. So you have to work on the design in order to improve that limit. So BYD now has put online its blind battery, which is very potent, very strong. And CATL also is working to produce new batteries, not only NCM ones, but also LFP. So they are working on different aspects of the battery. The relation between battery firms and OEMs is quite delicate. Of course, the leading firms like CATL has a lot of clients and it's kind of has this pricing power advantage. But still, with big clients, with big OEMs, they have to work together. And also OEMs, they have especially different choices of suppliers. So this collaboration and has to be very cared of. Now we can go into the center of this presentation is about the value chain of the EV battery in China is actually very, very complex. Not only companies from battery background, which used to work, for example, for the cell phones or for other related activities, now all want to go into the EV sector because they saw that there are profits. They think there will be a big future because China needs these vehicles because the world. So actually, we see that battery firms, they develop not only upstream and also downstream in order to consolidate their advantages and also to combine different resources that they have at disposition in order to reinforce their position. We can see, so in this mapping, it's not exhaustive, it's just a presentation, some example of some key firms, what they are doing actually along the value chain. So to make it clear, if you look at the first slide, we kind of define different segments along the value chain of EV battery, from raw material, from the battery components, the powertrain, and into the EV assembly, and also the after-use battery reuse, recycling, and different diversified usage, for example, storage. On the left, if you look at the column, we have different kind of actors that actually into this value chain, which are not all of origin like battery forms. So we see that the companies actually used to be focused on mining, refining. We see that company from, for example, car producing, that is obvious, but still it comes from a very totally different sector. We see a company that from the downstream recycling demanding sectors also going up and want to go into different segments of the battery value chain. Nonetheless, also there are also other, for example, startups specialized in in technology. We know that Huawei or ZTE, they are also investing, maybe also through joint venture with other battery firms, but they all want to share a piece of cake. So into this table, we see that actors are moving from their original core business into different segments, but especially always quite related to their core business. For example, mining companies, they will not go into building the cars. They will just go into the material producing, or maybe the downstream battery recycling, because it's really closely related to their core business. We see that, for example, energy companies, last line, Baoneng and, for example, China Tower, they're from energy sector, but they also need a material supply from the battery sector. So they are now also investing into this part in order to have a synergy, a larger synergy. But the most interesting is the part of battery firms, of course, themselves. If we look at the light three, the incumbent LIB manufacturers, so for example, CATL, BYD, they started as firms producing batteries for cell phones, for other computers, for other devices. Now they are actually labeled firstly as EV battery producer. That's why it's a big change for these firms. And also, if we look at how they are positioning on the value chain, it's very impressive. CATL, BYD, and also some other major firms, they are trying to really enter into different segments of the value chain in order to have the best control of the material price, of the module production, so that they can be more locked up also with their clients. And they also have to go into the recycle, as we mentioned, maybe Bruce mentioned, that in the park, they also alongside the production capacity, they maybe also construct, build the recycle facilities, because they want to build a closed cycle of this material and battery business. So that's what is happening in China. That these actors are really active, not only in China, because they also have to, they will also want to go to other markets because they have other clients. So that's why also they are investing a lot in Europe, some in US, and the competition continues, and they also collaborate with other companies in order to have a better hold of the market. So let me conclude in time and try to be brief. So the conclusion is that if we look at the case of China, we can learn a lot. Yes, we know that Chinese government is always really hand-on in development, but sometimes it's necessary, especially for a new sector, for a new industry like EV, like battery, that is really important to have the support, policy support, to have also the flexibility of adaptation, because Chinese government continues to adapt their guidance, their technical requirements, and also changing the subsidy with other program strategies. So it's really important to have this kind of flexibility in the policy. On the other side, it's still a risk for company which developed so a large value chain coverage. Some companies really, they failed to survive. If we look at the global level, so Chinese company now, they are probably facing strong competition also from future battery firms that are growing in Europe and the US, especially in Europe, because each country in Europe are now supporting their own local battery industry and EV chain. So my opinion is that this kind of competition will continue. And also rebound on the question I heard before is that there are different boundaries and different strategies of country to maybe block Chinese competitors. One concern, I think, is also related to what presented by Professor Wu and other presentations, is that the carbon footprint requirements will be very essential also for battery producers, because it's really energy intensive. It's really quite crucial to this environment aspects and social aspects. So Europe has been passing, for example, laws. They want to pass laws, for example, to block suppliers that cannot satisfy certain carbon emission requirements. This will be a big challenge for Chinese ones to in order to satisfy these requirements and continue to export. So we will see how the landscape changes in the coming 5 years. I think there will be big challenges for everyone. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Yishu. Let's stop your sharing. Get into some Q&A. So on your last slide, you mentioned some companies that failed at vertical integration. Do we know who they are?
Well, yeah, we know some battery firms that filed a financial petition because they didn't be able to return maybe some debts. So the name now escapes me, but also recently we have a big group which is called Evergreen. So it's a company, it's a group started from real estate, but they bought a car company. They also had their battery production ambitions, but recently they are facing really big crisis in China. So it's not easy for these companies, and especially with that also raw material that is quite at sky price. So it's really a big pressure at this moment. Their margin actually has been quite smaller recently compared to years before. Battery firms are complaining that they have to cut their prices because the EV also have to cut their prices because the subsidy are reducing. So everyone has to take part of this consequences.
So companies had to spend a lot of money to invest in vertical integration. Where was that money coming from?
Wow, good questions. Yeah, we know that some company, or we can say the major part of the companies that can raise such money, they are listed in the market, in the stock market. So generally they will raise money from the market, and they will also use the bonds, the credit from the banks, so that every several years they will find different financial programs in order to collect their financial resources. So yeah, it's in China, the banks, they are still having quite a good say in this kind of activities, especially if it's in line with the government strategy. So EV or battery, they are regarded as green, as a future. So banks will be more available to help these companies also.
Well, we know that the manufacturers, both at the auto manufacturers, at the provincial as well as the central government level, have access to some funding from the central government. Did that also apply to the battery companies as they were developing?
Well, funding, I think, yes, sometimes they can be, government will participate also in the capital. And maybe for certain time, for example, 5 years or 10 years, 5 years, probably 10 years too long. So there will be some equity from funding. And also there will be also kind of subsidy, kind of like a government premium for companies that has technology innovation or has any advanced innovation. So we'll also receiving this indirect support from the government.
Okay, thank you.
welcome.
Now the Chinese companies, the battery makers, they have quite a lead in globally right now in terms of battery sales and percentage of sales. When you look at the future, we see that, you know, that the Chinese, the Chinese country is much farther ahead than particularly the US. The EU is coming on fast in terms of their development of EVs, and the US will be there eventually. Do you see that these battery companies will be able to keep up the kind of lead that they have in global battery production and sales as the EU gets stronger in terms of EVs and the US starts building its EVs as well?
Yeah, this is a big question of the challenges that I also mentioned in Europe. They really want to be self-dependent also. They don't want to rely on Chinese suppliers for this so important industry of the future. But for a short term, yes, maybe 5 years, around 5 years, it's not, because to build battery, maybe you think production of battery is simple. You just have the raw material, have certain technology, and you build it. But actually, it requires a lot of components. So we really are looking at a value chain in itself. Chinese companies, they not only have the expertise in producing the batteries that we are currently using. We don't talk about the future batteries, but they also have a lot of speciality also in, for example, battery equipment that in Europe we don't have this expertise yet. So for a certain period of time, Chinese company will still be suppliers for Europe, I think. But eventually, maybe 5 to 10 years, European will catching up. But maybe then the technology also evolves. And also the market focus maybe changes. Maybe we are not looking at Europe, we are looking at Africa. For the moment, Africa is very small. They are mostly using electric motors, but maybe in the near future, they will also require supply of electric 4-wheel electric vehicles. So we don't know. But I think Chinese and Europe, they will, like we say, cooperation and competition. If the world still goes like what it goes, if it's not locked up, like what we see in China now, I hope not. So I think that will continue this kind of dynamics that push everyone to go forward.
And I think one of the questions from the audience has to do with this topic about future development. Now, what is the status of the development of solid-state batteries by the Chinese battery suppliers? Do you see when they will be able to commercialize, and are they working with OEMs for their solid-state battery commercialization?
I'm not sure. I don't want to make mistakes. I think some companies, they are testing, but commercialize needs still maybe some years at least. But I know the states are putting a lot of effort in pushing forward this program. They have also experts and from Tsinghua and also from the OEMs working together on this. I think also there's kind of joint venture, if I don't make mistake, or kind of collaboration also with, I think Toyota with Japan, because they also want to go into Chinese markets. So Chinese are learning. They are learning. They are not leading, but they are learning very fast.
Very good. And one of the issues that I think all the auto manufacturers are dealing with right now has to do with their not being pushed out of the powertrain business, because here we have major suppliers that are creating basically the powertrain of the future, which the foreign automakers in the past dominated. And it makes me wonder, and I guess the question to you is, do you think that the global automakers will begin R&D in making their own batteries? And if yes, where does this put the current battery suppliers?
Yeah, it's a question that we have been asking for a long time, but I think it's possible that OEM invest in a startup, battery startup, or acquire a startup to integrate it into its group, into its business ecosystem. In that way, maybe it can also have part of its battery. But I think because the technology is also changing, it will be very complicated and also costly, quite costly for OEMs to chase also after this line, if they also want to be dominant in the battery. So probably they will still opt collaboration or alliance strategy, like I said, with other batteries, or maybe acquire a battery firm if it's an opportunity. I think for the moment, that's what I think as better strategy for OEMs, because also they have their own problems, their own transition to do. For example, now all the OEMs are looking at circular economy. So they have to redesign their business model totally. We have seen that Hanoi is quite leading with its refactory in Flins near Paris, and other companies also following this trend. So I think they also have other issues in their mind. Maybe they will not be able to play along so long lines.
Yeah, we see this in the U.S. as well. I mean, in terms of the companies trying to make some sense of how they're going to play this out. It's joint ventures right now. It's cooperation with the battery makers. It's though VW, I think, has started its own battery design. They started working on some battery design. They might be doing this in cooperation with somebody, but you know, you can't help but think. And your point about actually taking over and purchasing a battery company also becomes an option as a way of kind of quickly getting into the game, if that's someplace they want to go. You know, we're so early on in the development of batteries that it might be a while to actually say, you know, this is as good as it's going to get. Now maybe we can go in and buy one of these companies, and now we control pricing. You know, that's it. Manufacturers and suppliers are always working on pricing between them about how they're going to, you know, who's going to make money here.
Yeah, and also maybe instead of buying a battery firm, they can, for example, they go into the battery recycle, and maybe start from some other parts of the value chain and maybe gradually go into the center. But they have to be careful, I think, because it's
Song, do you have any comments about the OEMs and doing their own battery technology? It's okay if you don't have any if you don't have anything, you can. All right, let's wait a minute. He's got.
Yeah, my understanding is on this battery technology is more like there contains a lot of know-how, which means it's not like commodity or it's like it can easily be involved. It's electronics with chemical technology know-how. So my understanding is on most of the OEMs, they work for the moment now. They are keen to working on the making a JV with battery. For example, GM in China, they have set up a JV with the CATL, and like Volkswagen, they have invested part of heavily invested with Goshen battery company, and I believe, for example, BYD, they're making their own battery, but this could be one of the typical, because for BYD, they have the battery business unit before they have automotive business unit. So which means you cannot say they are not exactly same as a GM or Volkswagen in China. So this is what I understood. Yeah.
And also BYD is actually separating this two businesses.
Yeah,
because
that's
they
right.
want to also sell their
They're
battery
they're
to other
separating?
OEMs.
So they're trying to make the battery business as an autonomous standalone, which means they could sell the battery.
So
to
they
everyone.
can sell the blade battery
Exactly,
to
everyone.
other companies.
Or it will be conflicts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Very good. Thank you. Shishu, I think that's all we have for you today. Thank you again for taking the time and filling in for us and giving your insight into your research. I think this is
I'm very happy to participate, and also I learned a lot today with other speakers and with you, and also with all the interesting questions that the audience raised.
okay. All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this session. Want to thank our audiences. We have an audience here who stuck around with us for the in person, and we have the online audience that's been with us. Want to thank you all for your questions and support for the conference. We're glad that you guys are all here, and we hope that you get something out of it. We always learn something new from this, and it's always part of the learning process for us. It also has to do with the support that we get from our affiliates. Again, we always like to thank our affiliates for providing the monies that we need to put on the conferences and to do our research. We couldn't do it without them. So again, a shout out to our affiliates. Our next conference will be in February. I think it's February 22nd conference, looking at kind of like post-pandemic issues related to the pandemic and how that's affecting new mobility strategies. We talked a little bit about that with Song and the changes in patterns of public transport compared to pre-pandemic levels. So I think there's some interesting stories that can be told about this. So we'll see you then in February. Thank you to all our speakers, and everyone have a good holiday and a new year. We'll see you in 2023. Take care. Bye-bye.